All right, so in this stream, we're going to look at a flyer redesign that I recently finished, and I'm going to tear this whole thing apart and show you how I did this, how I built this up, how I designed it, my thinking and my process behind it, and how I achieved what I achieved. So let's just jump right in. All right, thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate it. Make sure you are active in the chat, be brave, be bold, and let me know your thoughts or comments or questions in the chat, and be part of the creation of this content while we do it live. That'll help me kind of steer this stream the way that you guys want it to go. So what we're looking at right here on the screen is, on the left-hand side, this is the old flyer. This is like a half-page ad for a local antiques and collectibles mall. It's just down the road from my house, actually, and I've done work for them in the past, and I wanted to share this with you, some of my process and how we get to from what's on the left to what's on the right here, and how I did that, and all the pieces and everything that I used right inside Google Slides. So first of all, I'm just going to show you a bit of my process. Okay, I like to start from the beginning with a little sketch, something like this. Okay, a little notebook. That really helps me save a lot of time, because I can iterate very quickly on this, and if I don't like something, I can cross it out or just turn the page and just keep scribbling away and keep doodling away. Now, my background in fine art and drawing definitely helped me do this, but it's not necessary. Some of my drawings are as simple as just stick figures and circles and shapes. So that's actually a big part of my process, is little notebooks like this. I've got a little Mario sticker on this one that I just like to keep handy next to me by the computer, but also I keep one usually in a bag with me, so if I'm out and about and I have an idea, I can capture that idea and instantly get it into a shareable medium. That's so important for me, is the process of that flow of information from an idea in my head that doesn't exist to anyone else, to something on paper that I can just, hey, is this good? And I like to take pictures with my phone. I use the Google document scanner quite a bit, which is just a camera. It takes 4 pictures, and then you can, and it stitches it all together automatically. And I have it set so that it just uploads to my Google Photo account, so that when I get to the computer, everything's there. And so here's a little better picture of what that looks like in my notebook. Okay, so I just use like a ballpoint pen, or doesn't really matter what pen, just it's a scribble, right? It's a doodle, and it helps me organize things in a very fast way. This is a rapid prototyping before I ever get to the computer. So this is, again, it's a big part of my process, a big part of how I accomplish something like what you see on the right here. All right, so let's pull this apart. So now that we have an idea, right? I wanted something, a big header graphic at the top, a logo, very, very simple stuff, information, and then we've got a little special, a call to action at the very bottom. This is a lot like how I set up my websites, in fact. So something that's eye-catching, attention-grabbing. Hopefully, it's aesthetically pleasing. It's appealing to our eyes. Then bullet point information, big headlines, and then I use hierarchy, visual hierarchy, and contrast to separate things into smaller chunks, trying to make things as digestible as possible. So there's as much intellectual lifting going on here as technical tasks being done. So really all I need now is just a layout tool. I don't need a lot of fancy functions and software and things, right? I know what I'm trying to create here by my little scribbly drawing, and Google Slides allows me to create the kinds of things that I like to create. So I'm just going to pull everything. Actually, let me just do this. I will select all of it. and I'll just move it off here so that I can show you piece by piece how I've built this. All right, so here we are. Now, I like to use master slides for my backgrounds. If you've been following my videos, I've mentioned this before. So you go to the slide menu. Let me zoom in on that. Slides, edit masters, and this will bring you into something that looks similar, but it's got this like darker gray background, so you know that you're in the master slide section. And it doesn't look like there's anything in here right now, but let me just change the background color here to something darker. And now you can see the assets that I'm using in here. And basically it's just 2 PNGs, and I've duplicated them. So I've got one, I found this is a very, very simple, and it's actually kind of blurry, which I liked. It's not too super detailed. This is helpful for when you want to push things further back, make them more blurry, don't have as much detail in them. So that's one PNG that I just duplicated and cropped. If I double click on this, you can see I've got the full image in here. It's just cropped. So my original PNG image wasn't quite tall enough, so I just duplicated it and cropped it. So that I have now 3 pieces that look like they're seamless. And then I'm using one of my gradient PNGs just to add a little bit more light towards the bottom. This way, no matter what I change my background color to on my specific slide or slides, I will have some nice contrast toward the bottom. And I wanted that because I have a call to action towards the bottom. And I wanted to make sure that all of my text would be high enough contrast, that there wouldn't be anything behind it that would be too overpowering or overwhelming visually. So I've just lined these pieces up on my canvas like so. And I'll change my background back to transparent. And this, for this layout, now anything that uses this layout, any slide or page that uses this layout, these graphics that I've created in the master slide layout will be assigned to them. So I can't now accidentally select some of those background pieces. This is one of the tricks that I use to really help myself organizing the pieces on my canvas, because I've got enough other things to try to deal with. Okay, the next thing I did was I grabbed a high resolution photo from Unsplash. That's UNSPLASH. I'm just gonna show you all of my resources and how I use them. So Unsplash, these photos can be used however you want. And it talks about it on the site. You're welcome to check it out. You can submit photos to their site. I think this just started as a photo blog, and now they receive high-resolution photos from all over the world, and there's no restrictions on how to use these. So I just searched for, I think I just searched for winter and found the image you saw. After scrolling through, let's just pretend it's doesn't really matter. Let's just pretend it's this one. So I click on it. I click on it again to get the high resolution version, and then I just right click, copy image, and then I can go over to my Google Slides document tab and paste it right into my Google Slides. So that's how I got this image in here. That's how I got all of my images in here, except for one, which is a PNG that I edited in another program, but that's also free. We'll get to that. So that's how I got this image in here, this sort of vintage, antique-looking Christmas tree decoration, and I just cropped it and put it right up there at the top. And I wanted to have some contrast visually that sort of changed in texture and color. So I also got I just did a search back on Unsplash for wood pattern or wood grain, wood texture. And you can see there's just lots of these that come up, and these are just wonderful high resolution images. Because this is for print, I wanted to get the highest resolution photos that I could to make sure that I retain as much detail and information in these images as possible, so they look really, really nice and sharp when they're printed. Okay. And then everything else in here, other than these PNGs, this is all created with the basic shapes and text tools in Google Slides. So this, I'm just going to ungroup this here. This little logo here, if I do a Control-Alt-Shift and G, I can ungroup that whole thing. Okay, and then this is in a group. This is just word art. If I double click on it, I can edit it here, just like that. And I've just tilted it slightly, and I've given this circle. It's just a circle with a white stroke. It's on 4 points, and the background is on the gradients. And I just used this dark yellow linear gradient. Okay, that's all I did, and just put it into a group with Control-Alt-G. Put that into a group, and then I just lined it up, centered it on my page. Now, before I did too much more, I want to show you a little trick. I wanted to make sure that this would work for a professional printer if I had this sent off to outsource my printing to. I use GotPrint a lot, actually, but you can use whatever, whatever kind of printer you want. And in fact, you can print these off of an inkjet printer. That's fine. And I did that just to give myself a little proof, and this is how they turned out. They looked very, very nice. But I wanted something that's going to be nice, heavy stock with a UV coating to give it a real nice high gloss. I also wanted to have the ink go all the way to the edge of the paper, and the best way to do that is to send these to a high quality professional printer. And what they'll do is they'll trim down the full size of your design, and they actually print it larger and then trim it down so that the ink goes all the way to the edges. That's called bleed. And if you have any questions on that, just let me know. But the way that I set this up was, I'll go to File, Page Setup, and this is actually an 8.5 by 5.5 by an 8.5, or half an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. But I want to add a 1/8 inch bleed on each dimension, so the top, the bottom, the left, and the right, or a 1/4 inch on each, on the height and the width. So that made my total 5.75 by 8.75. Again, if you have any questions about that, how to set things up for professional printers, just let me know in the comments. I can talk more about that. So basically, I just set my document up a 1/4 inch on each side, or on each dimension, larger, because it's going to get trimmed down. Okay, and then you can go to View, Guides, and I talked about this in a previous stream, how to actually add guides and edit your guides. And I'll just show these guides so that you can see I've set these up, and I can right click on them and say Edit Guide, and you can see I've set the guides up actually to a 1/4 inch so that I know where my safe zone is. So there'll be an 1/8 of an inch that gets trimmed off, and I want at least an 1/8 of an inch inside that of margin for any information that I don't want to get too close to the edge. So that's just how I've set up my guides. And that actually really helps me just know exactly that anything that I put on this now piece of paper, it will be a nice heavy stock piece of paper, isn't going to get trimmed or too close to the edge. All right. Then I added some more word art for the actual information. So under the insert menu, you can go drop that down, say word art, type in your, and the reason I like to use word art for this kind of stuff is because it's a lot easier to resize and format, and I can space things a little bit more custom. So I just went in here, changed my font, made it italic, and then sized it however I want. And if you hold shift, you can maintain your proportions so that you keep the integrity of the font without stretching it like that. When you stretch it, it starts to look not so good. Okay, you don't want to stretch your text. All right, so I just added this in. Okay, centered that up. Then we've got a couple of lines. I just used the line tool, added in a line, formatted the color. Again, I've got some more word art in here, made it smaller. And everything in here is just using a couple of typefaces. I'm using Anton and Oswald, which are very, very similar. Anton for basically my headlines and Oswald for my body text. Then I wanted to have a really much more ornate ampersand in here, and this almost become like an ornament. And for that, I'm using Abril Fat Face. These are all, Google fonts that you can find and are available in Google Slides. I just love that you don't have to look for fonts or install fonts. If you want to change a font or see what's available, click on your font right up here, go to More Fonts, and you can scroll through just tons and tons and tons of fonts. You get down to the bottom, it'll just keep loading more. And you can search for one if you know the actual name of it. You can also filter these by display fonts, handwritten, monospace, serif, and sans serif. So there's lots of filtering options to find exactly what you're looking for. But I wanted to keep it pretty simple. I wanted to actually, simplify a bit more from what I had to work with here. So this was the original. We were going to get rid of this piece here, this holiday open house, because that was over. And I wanted to make it more simple but more sophisticated at the same time, if that makes sense. So more digestible, easier to read, less messy, less noisy, and also add more visual interest at the same time. So organization and hierarchy and contrast and color palettes, having a good color theory, all of those things really help put things into an order and a process that will help your viewer get the most out of this, because we want this to be more successful for them. All right, then I used just a ordinary text box, gave it an outline, put in my information there, centered that up. Okay, and then I found a PNG from PNG IMG. I used that here, just put this little holly and berries there. Now this mailbox I had to cut out manually, okay? And I used paint.net to do that. So I did my cutting out in paint.net, and you can, as I zoom in on here, you can see this is actually a little bit jaggedy. I could have even done a little bit better job, but I knew that this was going to be really small on this piece of paper. So I just did a quick cutout, got rid of the background, saved it as a PNG, and uploaded it back into Google Slides. Here's a trick that I do quite often. This same wood texture image here, if I double click on it, you can see the cropping here. And if you drag in this, you can get a lot of different options from the same photo. So that's exactly what I did for this bottom piece here. I wanted to sort of repeat that wood texture as like a motif. It helps with visual congruency and giving you something sort of to land on or anchor to, and that's what I did. But I used the format options, so I adjusted the cropping. I changed the cropping from since it's the same photo, but it looks different than the one up here. I took a different section of the photo. Then I also went to format options and pulled down the brightness to make sure I had enough contrast to sit some white text on it. Again, this is just word art and a little line to kind of separate the date from the call to action or the call out here for the special sales. That's it. That's all of the pieces. That's how it turned out. What's really cool about, now that I had set up going back a bit here, so rewind. What's great about the way that I set up the master slides and having that feature is that if I create a new slide now, just over here, I can right click and say new slide, or Control M is the shortcut key. Then I can right click on that and say apply layout and choose title slide. Now that doesn't look like anything is happening because those PNGs are only white and transparent. So I have to change my background. And if I change my background to anything darker than white, you'll be able to see my images. And all of a sudden that detail from the background comes in, and it really just adds quite a bit. Even though it's subtle and it's soft, and I think that it's using some constraint, it also gives that festive holiday feeling. And you know what it is without it sort of glaring at you and being too much in your face. That's what I was going for. But I can also iterate very quickly and say, you know what, maybe I want a background that's sort of like a purple gradient, and I could just continue building. Or maybe this would be the back of the flyer. I could design the back of it right inside the same document, which I think is super cool. So that's how we got from what's on the left here to what's on the right. And I know that they're going to look great. So there's my little proof, print those out, and I'll have them sent to a professional printer, and I know that everything's going to work perfectly. It's going to look great. Any thoughts, any questions, any comments from the viewers? Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you joining me here. Any questions on Google Slides or my design process? Unsplash is a really, really great resource. You don't have to worry about getting in trouble with licenses and things like that, which you really need to make sure you read license agreements and things like that for photos, or just make sure that you're using things that are commercial free. So this says right here, all photos published on Unsplash can be used for free. You can use them for commercial and non-commercial purposes. You do not need to ask permission from or provide credit to the photographer or Unsplash, although it is appreciated when possible. This is me giving credit to Unsplash. They do. They just continue providing great quality photos, and you can use them for all kinds of stuff. It's fantastic. So highly recommend using them. Then you don't have to ever worry about copyright infringements. Right? So if you're a school, if you're a designer, if you are a small business and need great stock photography, there's a huge growing collection. There's 10 brand new high resolution photos. That's the other part of this, is that sometimes it's hard to find photos that are high enough resolution to print. And these are beautifully detailed high resolution photos. If I click on one of them, click on it again, you can see how big these actually are. They look great on screen, and they also look really good in print. That'll be it for this stream. Thank you guys for joining me. If you want any of these resources like I used in this flyer, which was from my collection here of these gradient PNG assets, they go from a solid color, completely opaque, to completely transparent. And in this case, oh, I forgot to show you one thing. If I go to Slides, Edit Masters, I'll go back in here, change my background color so you can see it. One of the really neat things I think about these very, very small, lightweight, efficient image assets is if I go to the format options inside Google Slides here, you can see I've given it the negative recolor option. So if I take that off, you can see that it's actually black all the way to transparent. If I go to negative, I can just invert that. So it goes from white all the way to transparent. The transparency stays the same. The color inverts. And so I'm able to use one image either for a shadow or for, in this case, a nice linear gradient that gives me a little bit more contrast right here at the bottom where this sort of finer type is, and actually very important information, but it's smaller and more condensed. So I wanted to make sure I had some nice contrast right behind that. That's how I'm using that. And you can get these from joshuapomeroy.com/downloads. And this will just open in your web browser, and you can just click on make a copy, and it will copy it into your Google Drive, and you can use them however you want. There's some other assets in here as well. And if you found any of this helpful, you can help me create more assets, more information, more videos, more streams like this by supporting me on Patreon. And appreciate that very much. Also, let me just give a big shout out to my current Patreons on googledrawings.org. Because I want to say thank you. And if you go to the patron gallery, you can see my current patrons who I very much appreciate. Thank you guys, really appreciate it. If you'd like to be part of this, you get a vector flat or vector illustration depending on your tier, and you help support content like this. That's my spiel, and I thank you guys for it. All right,